All he needed was an oil change. Then, after paying a hefty fee and spending the night, he installed a covert camera. He waved it off immediately, but he felt something wasn't right when he went back to check on them. After installing covert cameras to inspect his vehicle, he saw a fraud the next day, which prompted him to contact the police. It would appear that David Sherman was busier than he appeared. In his own time, he participated in amateur racing and ran his own company. This implied that he was a better automotive expert than the average individual. David had a small collection of automobiles that he cherished. Because he was familiar with every aspect of the vehicle, he chose to take it to the economy lube shop when issues arose. However, he was well aware of the issue. Having checked his automobile before, he realized that the main problem was that the oil needed to be changed. Everything else was immaculate. He then went on Google and looked for economy lube, the closest garage. The cost of an oil change was only $20. What a deal, he declared. That evening, he brought his car into the garage with the expectation of getting a basic oil change. It shouldn't take long to replace an oil. It should be completed while you wait by a skilled technician, so he was taken aback when they informed him that the car would need to be left overnight. They continued informing him that after inspecting the automobile, they found further issues. It required a variety of flushes, including his transmission servicing and coolant and brake fluid flushes. When David had glanced over the automobile, he couldn't believe he had missed all of those things. But rather than fight with specialists, he handed them the automobile and hoped to find it in fine operating order the following day. Until he received the bill they sent him, they nearly got away with it. The fact that a $20 note had become a $287 charge shocked him. How it could have cost this much was beyond him. David understood that he was capable of doing all the job for free on his own. He wished to verify the legitimacy of the work by looking it over. He quickly came to the conclusion that something wasn't quite right. Everything remained same except for the oil change. Did they fulfill any of their promises? There was only one way for him to be certain. If he had Tohei immediately forgot about it after having to pay for an exorbitant bill and an overnight stay, but he realized something wasn't right when he went back to check on them. After covertly installing cameras to inspect his vehicle, he discovered a fraud the next day, which prompted him to contact the police. David's friend brought his own automobile to the same repair shop in search of a straightforward oil change. They would also ultimately impose a hefty fee on him. This was not a coincidence. There was a serious problem. What the hell were they thinking? It was time for them both to come to their senses. Following the $180 bill that David's buddy received, they hurried back to David's place to see the video. After pressing play, David observed the mechanism at work. The further the movie went on, the more David's jaw dropped. He was completely shocked by what the technician did, and then his face reddened with rage. He was not going to allow this firm to get away with this in any manner. Did they harbor animosity against David and his companion? Were they acquainted with them? Why would they do this if not? David took the evidence to the police after packing it up. He needed to have expert assistance if he was going to take down this massive garage chain. What was caught on camera? David was shocked to see that the technician was only changing the oil and not performing the expensive transmission service or flushes. They essentially committed fraud, and David had a nagging sensation that this hadn't happened to him and his friend alone. The identical speech used by the corporation to convince them to upsell both of them seems prepared. But what were the police saying? To their busy schedules, the police connected the men with a former fraud chief from the Hamilton Police, as managing dishonest conduct has been the foundation of Mark Sincheisen's profession. Confronting an organization the size of Economy Lube required caution. Sincheisen's experience was useful in this situation, yet even he had never witnessed something so obvious. If they are receiving money for services that they did not perform, that you paid for, in all honesty, that's fraud, Sincheisen states. He was certain that this firm was dishonest, but the challenge was substantiating his belief. The workers' responses to David and Sincheisen's confrontation were more bizarre than they could have imagined. This is the task for which we were trained. Yes, it doesn't feel good, but it's difficult to say no when your job is to generate as much revenue as possible for the firm and you get paid $1,000 or $2,000 every week, an employee said. We have a lot of folks that don't know anything about their cars, which is unfortunate. It facilitates our work. It's us or them, because if we don't generate enough money, we get fired, stated one more. After learning his lesson, David addressed the company's CEO, but was unable to persuade him to take responsibility. He said he was unaware of any of this and disclaimed any liability for specific employees. In addition, he acknowledged that it was fraud and promised to take quick action. He gave the matter some time to settle. Letting the corporation believe they were in the clear was the aim. However, David was going to go completely nuclear in a few months. For the covert mission, he used a friend's vehicle as collateral. David and a few reliable experts proceeded to ensure that the car's components were mended, cleaned, and flushed as needed. It was in no manner in need of any kind of service. Installing the same camera configuration as before was the next step, but with a few extra added for greater coverage and angles as well as live viewing. In the end, David managed to convince his mother to enter as the naive elderly woman for the pièce de résistance. They set and baited the trap. They would soon discover a few additional scam sites in addition to learning exactly how dishonest the complete chain of garages remained when the mechanic saw his mother limp in. They exchanged sly smiles. He felt a wave of anger, yet he also enjoyed the experience in part. To date, how many individuals had fallen for scams? It was completely incorrect. What was the last estimate that they provided then? There was the usual spiel about flushing, blah blah blah, but now there was a new battery that needed to be installed, along with a serpentine belt and air filter. In addition, a damaged component required to be replaced. David smiled as his mom began to ask the precise questions he had advised her to ask. They were a devious concoction of recommendations from the authorities mixed with things he had discovered online. It was gold for scammers. His mother, seeming confused and defenseless, posed the initial query that would initiate a series of damning accusations. "A check is not accepted as payment. We only accept cash," they said. The first warning sign was that. Things became uncomfortable when she demanded to view the broken section afterwards. Customers aren't allowed in the back. However, the script was also prepared for that dot. "Let's take it out to the front then, and you can show me." The mechanic looked like he was sucking on a lemon as his face puckered. But in order for David to go to the next round, it was time to grant their wishes. As anticipated, the job was not completed, with the exception of replacing the air filter and belt, which were never in need of repair. Furthermore, to give it a somewhat fresher appearance, they just cleaned the old battery rather than replacing it. This was becoming out of control. Together with his incredible con-busting team, visited 6 other sites, all belonging to the same business that had first deceived him. The amount of the bill fluctuated depending on the results, but a certain pattern was evident. This would be a huge hit with the police. Although an inquiry was already underway, David was proud and happy as the policemen's eyes widened. They didn't get great cases like this one handed delivered to them with all the supporting documentation. Every day his main desire, aside from getting his money back, was to see with delight how they dismantled the man's life. In addition to wanting to ensure that they never again caused harm to others, he also wanted to find out whether other businesses were thought to be involved in similar activities so that he could pursue them as well.